Welcome to the Stoa. The Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
Okay. Welcome to the Metagame Mastermind. What do we do here? Well, this is our tagline. This is an ongoing experiment where we're prototyping digital gangs to help people maintain their sovereignty and respond to the meta crisis. And that last point is in reference to what I was just saying about some of the existential risks being faced by humanity right now. And the digital gangs component is basically small little units of community that bring people together in a way that can be useful in response to some of these threats. But we're not going to talk about the threats tonight. We're going to talk more about community. Before I get into any of that, just a reminder, these sessions tend to be smaller, so I really encourage people to turn on their video and to use the chat. Feel free to use it while I'm talking and chat with each other, have a parallel conversation, and really make friends. Because if we're just getting information here and we're not building relationships, then that's a performative contradiction, and I don't want to be complicit in that. So I'm pushing everybody to lean into relationships. I'll say this every week. The other thing is we have a writing crew because there's a lot of really interesting thinkers in this space that want to put their ideas into some form of public sense-making artifact. On Eastern time, we meet at 6:30 a.m. every weekday, and someone's going to share that link in the chat if you're interested. It's 1 hour. You just jump into a Zoom room and you write, and we put our writing intentions and we hold each other accountable for the hour. And there's also a Slack channel for the conversation to continue. So you'll also see that link in the chat. Okay, tonight's structure. We're going to talk about authentic relating and how it relates to the metagame and how it relates to this masterminding project that we're exploring here. And then we're going to do it. We're going to go into breakout rooms and we're going to experiment with something called the noticing game, which I'll explain. And depending on how many rounds we do that for, we'll have some time for a group chat at the end. So this is going to be quite participatory. I'm hoping to shut up after a few minutes. So if you wanted to just listen and not be involved, then you kind of came to the wrong Zoom room. But I encourage you to stay because it's going to be good. So let's do a quick introduction to tie everything back together to what the theme of this weekly session is, because I know there's some new faces here. First of all, what is a mastermind? We're calling this the metagame mastermind. A lot of you may have heard this term. I think it goes back to Napoleon Hill. It's kind of like a self-help term. A friendly alliance with one or more persons who will encourage one to follow through with both plan and purpose. So it's basically an accountability group, right? When people care whether or not you show up or care whether or not you are doing the things you say you will do, the probability that you will do those things goes up. And so if you have a little tribe like that that's holding you together, that actually helps raise your sovereignty. And that's the mastermind. We have a slightly different take on this, but you'll see as I share more how it fits into what we're doing tonight. Tonight is this weekly Saturday session called the Metagame Mastermind, where we explore a bunch of different topics related to masterminding, related to everything really that has to do with relationships and developing sovereignty and our response to reality. So it's quite a broad topic. And that is a weekly event that occurs in the Stoa, which is a series of a bunch of different weekly events and ad hoc events. What you don't see here and what you won't see in the Stoa are all the triads, groups of 3, that have spun off of these Saturday sessions. And these are little mastermind groups. And I like calling them digital gangs because a lot of these people are in different time zones and they're just meeting only on Zoom because of the pandemic. And these are 3, sometimes there's 4 people, sometimes there's 2 people, but generally they're 3-person groups, many of which are in this room right now, that are doing this whole accountability thing. So that's just some context for what's going on here. If you're interested in this, I will share my email at the end and I can give you guys a chance to sign up for one of those triads. So that's a mastermind. What is the metagame? This is actually a really elusive concept that has some buzz, and you see it a lot in Twitter. But here's a definition I really like. Playing the metagame helps us discover the right relationship with the ecology of games we are currently playing. So it's basically an analogy to think about life as a series of games, and then to occupy the position where you have the most sovereignty over all those games. And then you can reflect on, do I want to be a part of this game? Do I want to opt out of this one? Do I want to play that game that I'm not playing right now? Or how do I play this game better because I'm realizing it's one of the more important games? So at the very least, that's the metagame. It's that position of reflection on all the other games. But it's more than that, which we'll come back to in other sessions. But for the sake of tonight, that's the definition of the metagame. And some of these games that might come in with the mastermind are games having to do with like your finances or your career or romance or all these things, buzzwords that we've written here. All these different games that a mastermind group can actually help you play better. Now, this is the setup. For tonight, the game that we're going to focus on is authentic relating, which in itself is kind of meta, because authentic relating, for those of you who don't know, it's a term that it has now become something of a movement that has kind of specific instantiations that refer to the process of relating to each other more authentically. It's like you can just take it at the level of the name. And relating to each other authentically is necessary for successful mastermind groups. If you just want to hold each other accountable, you need some level of authenticity. But if you want to play the metagame mastermind, then you need to upregulate your authenticity a little bit. And why? Why am I saying, why is this important? Oh, and this is the most important part. Basically, this is in getting into right relationship with each other, right? Authentic relating is a practice for doing that. And I put this image here. I'm pretty sure many of you have seen this. This is a piece of art from one of the Burning Mans a few years ago, which shows, I think, something that a lot of us often feel, right? Where, for whatever reason, maybe inauthenticity, the inner child or the more authentic parts of ourselves have difficulty reaching the authentic parts of others. And you might be wondering why any of this matters, right? Why, like, isn't this about accountability? Like, why are we talking about authentic relating? Why are we talking about our feelings and authenticity? Well, the reason is because, as this incredible person once said, the meaning of life is friends. And this is something I've been thinking a lot about lately. You can tell I tweeted this very recently. The meaning of life is not accountability groups. The meaning of life is not your career. It's not, and maybe this is my opinion, but I'm just going to go with it. It's not cultivating personal sovereignty. I mean, those are good things, but if we make that the meaning of life, there's something kind of perverted about it. Why would we cultivate personal sovereignty if we're in a relational vacuum? And the more and more I think about this, the more I realize that it's ultimately, none of this makes sense if there's no friendship, if there's no relation, if there's no other. And I want to take us down that path more and more tonight. So one of the things that stops us from actually, one, realizing that the meaning of life is friends, and feel free to disagree with me on this, but if you play with this for a second, you'll realize that we don't always think like this. We often make decisions at the expense of our friendships in service of other things that supposedly are more meaningful than our friendships, than our relationships. One of the things that keeps coming up that gets in the way of genuine friendship, authentic relating, is something called impression management, which we talked about 2 weeks ago. And we're going to riff on this I think in coming weeks as well. And basically, this is a conscious or unconscious process in which we attempt to influence the perceptions of the other people around us about ourselves. It's that you kind of hold back information and you try to make yourself seem cooler than you are, or you try to make yourself seem more powerful than you are, or whatever. And it can be conscious. We can be morally agnostic about it. Sometimes impression management might actually be useful, but unfortunately, oftentimes it's unconscious. And our impressions create this persona that stand in the way of authentic relating. So we've explored in the past some ways to break through this, and tonight we're going to explore another one. And again, I want to remind us of the goal, right? Underneath the idea of the purpose of life being friends is the idea that ultimately we're seeking connection or connectedness. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with Brené Brown. And I love this quote: "In order for connection to happen, we have to allow ourselves to be seen." And impression management is when you're throttling that potential to be seen, when you're putting something else, you're introducing your own agenda in the way of that. And again, this isn't necessarily bad, but I think it's unfortunate when it's happening unconsciously. So this is what we're going to lean into in this breakout session. And if you're feeling a little bit nervous about it, that's probably a good sign, because this is going to be a little bit awkward. It's called the noticing game. And I'm going to explain the rules, and then I'm going to demo it, and then I'll give everyone a chance to ask some questions. So the structure is super, super simple. It's two people in the Zoom room. One person is person A, the other is person B. You can go alphabetically. And person A goes first and says, what I notice when I'm with you is, and then they fill in the blank. And then person B says, hearing that, what I'm noticing is, and then they fill in the blank. And you go back and forth, and you do this for 5 minutes. And the idea is that you only say things that you are noticing. This creates something like a conversational meditation where I say something that I'm noticing, you say something that you're noticing, and then we both are attending to only things that are happening right now. And that starts to peel back impression management to some extent. It's definitely still going to be there, and to some extent it should be, because you're going to meet some strangers and you want to keep yourself somewhat guarded. But it also opens up the door to actually be seen, and that opens up the door to relate to each other more authentically. Some of the things you can say, some of the things you can notice the other person's physical appearance. When I'm with you, I notice that you seem to be looking away a lot. Sensations in your own body. I notice I'm feeling nervous tension in my chest. Thoughts you're having. I notice that I'm curious about how you got that scar on your forehead. Emotions you're feeling. I notice that I'm grateful that we're getting to have this experience together. I'm going to share all of this in the chat, or someone else who might have it. So don't worry about remembering this stuff, but it can be something that you're seeing, something physical, something that you're experiencing as a sensation, something that you're thinking, a thought, a piece of language, and something that is just an emotion. And now we're going to demo this so that it makes a little more sense. All right. So, Khalil, would you like to do a couple rounds of the noticing game?
Sure, let's go.